If you've ever booked a flight to Spain for £19.99 or grabbed a seat to Edinburgh for less than a train ticket, you've experienced the budget airline revolution. For the last 2 decades, carriers like Ryanair, EasyJet, and Wizz Air have completely transformed how Europeans travel. You could fly across the continent for pocket change, and millions of people built their entire holiday plans around these dirt-cheap fares. But that era is ending faster than most people realize. I recently looked at flight prices for routes I used to book all the time, and the difference is shocking. That £20 fare to Malaga, now it's £89. The weekend trip to Amsterdam that cost less than a night out, you're looking at over £100 each way during peak times. And it's not just a temporary spike. The entire business model that made budget airlines possible is falling apart. Walk through any UK airport right now and you'll see the cracks. Flight delays are constant. Cancellations happen without warning. Check-in queues snake through terminals because airlines have cut staff to the bone. The planes themselves look more cramped than ever, packed with 189 seats where there used to be 180. Every single service that was once included now costs extra. Want to bring a normal-sized bag? That's £35. Need to print your boarding pass at the airport? Another £20. Fancy sitting with your family? Pay up. Budget airlines used to make money by being efficient and flying constantly. Now they're making money by nickel and diming passengers while their actual operations are hemorrhaging cash. The low-cost model worked when fuel was cheap, planes were available, and staff would work for less. None of those things are true anymore. And here's the thing that should worry every traveler. Several major budget airlines are already on the edge. Some won't survive the next few years. The cheap flight era is ending, and most people have no idea it's happening. Fuel costs used to be predictable. Budget airlines built their entire business around knowing roughly what they'd pay for jet fuel months in advance. They'd hedge their fuel purchases, lock in prices, and calculate fares accordingly. It was one of the few things they could actually control. That system is broken now. Jet fuel prices have been all over the place since 2020. When COVID hit, prices crashed to almost nothing. Airlines that had locked in high prices lost billions. Then came the recovery, and prices shot up faster than anyone expected. Russia's invasion of Ukraine made it even worse. Suddenly, European airlines couldn't access Russian airspace for many routes, forcing longer flights that burned more fuel. At the same time, oil prices spiked. For a traditional airline like British Airways, fuel costs are maybe 25% to 30% of their operating expenses. They can absorb shocks because they charge higher fares and offer premium cabins. But for budget airlines, fuel is often 35% to 40% of costs. When fuel prices jump, their entire profit margin disappears instantly. I looked at Ryanair's financial reports from the last 3 years, and you can see the panic. In one quarter, they spent nearly 50% more on fuel than the year before, but they couldn't raise fares enough to cover it because passengers just wouldn't pay. EasyJet faced the same problem. They tried adding fuel surcharges, but customers rebelled and booked with competitors instead. The real killer is that budget airlines can't cut back on flying. Their planes are usually leased, not owned, so they're paying for them whether they fly or not. Empty seats lose money, but filling them at current fuel prices also loses money. They're trapped. And it gets worse. The International Air Transport Association predicts fuel costs will stay volatile for years because of green fuel mandates and limited refining capacity. Budget airlines built their model on cheap, stable fuel. Without it, the math simply doesn't work anymore. Boeing and Airbus can't build planes fast enough. That might sound like a good problem to have, but for budget airlines, it's an absolute disaster. Budget carriers don't keep old planes around. Their entire strategy depends on having new fuel-efficient aircraft that rarely break down. Ryanair flies almost exclusively Boeing 737s. EasyJet uses the Airbus A320 family. Wizz Air is all Airbus. When they order planes, they're ordering hundreds at a time with delivery schedules planned years in advance. Those schedules are now completely wrecked. Boeing's 737 MAX disaster set everything back. After 2 fatal crashes, the plane was grounded for nearly 2 years. Airlines that had ordered them were stuck waiting. Even after it returned to service, production has been slow and plagued with quality control issues. In early 2024, A door plug blew off an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX mid-flight. Boeing's reputation is in tatters, and they're delivering planes months or even years late. Airbus isn't much better. They're backed up with orders stretching into the late 2020s. If you order an A320 today, you might not get it until 2029 or 2030. For budget airlines trying to expand or replace aging aircraft, this is a nightmare. I spoke with someone who works in airline operations, and they told me the shortage is worse than the public realizes. Airlines are literally cannibalizing grounded planes for spare parts because new parts take months to arrive. Some carriers are keeping older, less efficient planes flying longer than planned, which destroys their fuel efficiency advantage. The shortage also drives up lease costs. When planes are scarce, lessors can charge whatever they want. Budget airlines used to negotiate great deals because they ordered in bulk. Now they're competing with everyone else for a limited supply. Those higher lease costs go straight onto ticket prices, and suddenly that £30 fare needs to be £60 just to break even. Budget airlines have always treated their staff as a cost to minimize. Pilots and cabin crew were hired on short-term contracts, often through agencies in low-tax countries. Staff would work brutal schedules, be based far from home, and have almost no job security. For years, people accepted it because jobs were scarce and the airlines had all the power. That's completely flipped now. After COVID, thousands of experienced aviation workers left the industry. Pilots retrained as corporate flyers or moved abroad. Cabin crew found jobs with better hours and actual employment contracts. Ground staff took warehouse jobs that paid the same without the stress. When travel returned in 2022, airlines couldn't find enough people to operate their flights. Ryanair faced massive strikes across Europe in 2022 and 2023. Cabin crew in Spain, Portugal, France, and Belgium walked out repeatedly over pay and conditions. EasyJet crews in Spain staged strikes during peak summer travel. Wizz Air crews in Italy did the same. Every strike meant hundreds of canceled flights, millions in lost revenue, and furious passengers demanding compensation. I watched this unfold firsthand at Stansted Airport during one strike. The departures board was just rows of red canceled notices. Families with young kids were camping out in the terminal trying to rebook. One woman told me she'd been waiting 14 hours for information. The airline had simply run out of staff and planes to reroute people. But here's the thing, the staff aren't being unreasonable. A Ryanair cabin crew member in Spain might earn €1,100 per month base salary. They're expected to be available for shifts with just days' notice, pay for their own uniforms, and survive on commission from selling snacks and scratch cards on board. It's genuinely unsustainable. Budget airlines are now being forced to improve pay and conditions, which obliterates their cost advantage. When your business model requires treating humans as expendable resources, and humans stop accepting that your business model is finished. Budget airlines pioneered the art of the hidden fee. You'd see a £9.99 fare advertised, get excited, and then watch the price climb to £89.99 by checkout. Baggage fees, seat selection fees, payment fees, priority boarding fees, printing fees. Every possible service was monetized and maximized. For years, it worked. Passengers grumbled, but paid. The airlines could claim ultra-low headline fares for marketing while extracting real money through add-ons. Ryanair made more profit from ancillary fees than from ticket sales some years. It was genius in a frustrating sort of way. But regulators and customers are pushing back hard now. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority launched investigations into drip pricing, advertising low prices, then adding mandatory fees later. The EU strengthened passenger rights rules, making it harder to charge for things like printing boarding passes. Courts across Europe have ruled against various fee structures. In 2024, Spain fined Ryanair, EasyJet, and others millions of euros for charging hand luggage fees, arguing it violated consumer protection laws. I tried booking a simple return flight to Dublin recently just to see the fee breakdown. The base fare was £24.99 each way. By the time I added a cabin bag, £14, seat selection because I'm tall, and wanted legroom, £18. And priority boarding to actually use that cabin bag, £8. The return flight cost £133.98. That's more than 5 times the advertised price for what should be a basic service. Customers are noticing. Social media is full of complaints. Travel comparison sites now show the total price up front, destroying the budget airline's marketing advantage. Legacy carriers like British Airways started matching low fares on short-haul routes, while including bags and seats, making budget airlines less competitive. The hidden fees model is collapsing because it relied on customer confusion and regulatory tolerance. Both are disappearing. Without ancillary revenue, budget airlines lose billions. They're trapped between regulators who won't let them charge fees and operating costs they can't reduce. Budget airlines took on massive debt during COVID, and it's crushing them now. When the pandemic grounded flights in 2020, these carriers had almost no cash reserves. Traditional airlines had diverse income streams and government backing. Budget airlines had cheap fares and thin margins. When revenue vanished overnight, they nearly collapsed. Governments across Europe provided emergency loans and loan guarantees. Ryanair, despite its profitability, took state aid. EasyJet borrowed over £1 billion. Wizz Air raised cash through share sales and debt. Norwegian Air Shuttle, once Europe's third-largest budget carrier, completely collapsed and had to restructure, wiping out shareholders and slashing its fleet by 75%. I looked at the debt levels, and they're staggering. EasyJet currently carries debt around £2.5 billion. Ryanair's gross debt sits above €3 billion. Wizz Air has over $3 billion in long-term debt. These numbers don't sound catastrophic until you remember their profit margins are typically 5% to 10% in good years. The problem is the debt came with conditions and interest rates that made sense in 2020's low-rate environment. Now interest rates have spiked across Europe. Every loan, refinancing costs more. Airlines that borrowed at 2% are now looking at 6% or 7% when those loans mature. That's hundreds of millions in extra annual costs. And they can't grow their way out. Remember the aircraft shortage? Budget airlines traditionally expanded rapidly, adding routes and planes to spread fixed costs. Now they can't get planes. They're stuck servicing expensive debt with limited growth options and higher operating costs. Several smaller budget carriers have already gone under. Flybe collapsed in 2023. Primera Air failed in 2018. WOW Air died in 2019. These weren't mismanaged companies. They just couldn't handle the combination of fuel costs, competition, and debt. The next economic downturn will likely kill more. Budget airlines have no cushion. When revenue drops even slightly, they go from barely profitable to bankruptcy in months. The aviation industry is being forced to go green, and budget airlines are least prepared for it. The EU's emissions trading system now covers aviation. Airlines must buy permits for their carbon emissions. As permit prices rise, flying gets more expensive, but it's not just about buying permits. New regulations mandate airlines use sustainable aviation fuel, which costs 2 to 4 times more than regular jet fuel. The UK government wants 10% of all jet fuel to be sustainable by 2030. The EU has similar targets. These mandates are non-negotiable. Airlines must comply or stop flying. For budget carriers operating on 5% margins, this is catastrophic. If your fuel bill doubles and you can't raise fares enough to cover it, you're bankrupt. I've seen the projections and they're brutal. Sustainable aviation fuel availability is limited. It's made from waste oils, agricultural residues, or synthetic processes that require huge energy inputs. Supply can't meet demand, which means prices stay high. Airlines are competing for limited supplies, driving costs even higher. Traditional airlines are investing in newer, more efficient aircraft and can spread green fuel costs across premium passengers who'll pay more. Budget airlines have no premium passengers. Everyone's price sensitive. If a Ryanair fare goes from £30 to £60 to cover green fuel, passengers just won't fly. There's also the fleet problem. Budget airlines operate newer planes than most carriers, which should help with efficiency. But the newest, most efficient aircraft like Airbus's A320neo or Boeing's 737 MAX are the same ones stuck in production delays. Airlines can't upgrade their fleets to meet environmental targets because they can't get the planes. Then there's the political pressure. Flight shaming is real across Europe. Governments are encouraging train travel for short routes. France has already banned some domestic flights where train alternatives exist. More countries are considering similar rules. Budget airlines depend on those short, high-frequency routes. Losing them destroys their network model. The environmental transition will cost hundreds of billions across the industry. Budget airlines don't have hundreds of billions. They barely have hundreds of millions in reserve. If major budget airlines fail, the impact will be enormous. This isn't theoretical. We've seen smaller versions already. When Flybe collapsed in 2023, entire regional routes in the UK disappeared overnight. Exeter, Southampton, and Jersey lost most of their connections. Thousands of people had holidays cancelled. Business travelers suddenly had no way to reach clients. Regional economies that depended on those flights suffered immediately. Now imagine Ryanair or EasyJet failing. We're talking about carriers that fly 150 to 180 million passengers per year. That's roughly half of all short-haul travel in Europe. If they stopped flying, the remaining airlines couldn't possibly absorb the demand. There aren't enough planes, pilots, or landing slots. Ticket prices would skyrocket immediately. Basic economics: when supply drops and demand stays constant, prices explode. That £60 return to Barcelona could easily hit £300 or £400. Mediterranean holidays would become luxuries again, like they were before budget airlines existed. I talked to tourism officials in Spain and Portugal, and they're genuinely worried. Budget airlines bring millions of British, German, and Scandinavian tourists to Southern Europe. Those tourists spend money on hotels, restaurants, and attractions. Entire coastal economies depend on cheap flights. If those dry up, we're looking at mass unemployment and economic collapse in tourism-dependent regions. For the UK specifically, it would be devastating. London's dominance in European business and culture partly exists because you can fly there cheaply from anywhere. UK students study abroad because flights are affordable. British expats in Spain can visit family easily. Remote workers can live in Portugal and fly to meetings in London. All of that requires cheap, frequent flights. Airports would suffer too. Stansted, Luton, and regional airports like Liverpool and Edinburgh are almost entirely dependent on budget carriers. If those airlines failed, airports would have to close terminals, cut staff, and potentially shut down entirely. The collapse wouldn't happen overnight. It would be a slow bleed. Routes cut, bases closed, fleets shrunk. But the end point is the same: a European travel market where flying is expensive and exclusive again. Some budget airlines might survive by transforming completely, but it won't look anything like the model we know. Ryanair is already pivoting hard. They're actually improving customer service, which feels bizarre to say about Ryanair. They've reduced some of the most hated fees, stopped charging for small cabin bags on certain routes, and they're actively courting business travelers who'll pay more for flexibility and better timing. It's a complete reversal from their old strategy of treating customers like cargo. EasyJet took a different approach. They launched EasyJet Holidays, bundling flights with hotels and experiences to capture way more revenue per customer. Instead of making £30 on a flight, they're making £300 on a package deal. They're also focusing on primary airports like Gatwick rather than distant budget terminals, trying to compete directly with traditional carriers on convenience. Wizz Air is going even further. They're expanding into long-haul routes with new Airbus A321XLR aircraft that can fly 10 to 11 hours. They're chasing higher-margin routes to places like Dubai and the Maldives, trying to break out of the European short-haul trap entirely. It's a massive gamble that requires completely different operations and customer expectations. These strategies might work for the absolute biggest players. Ryanair has the scale, the cash reserves, and the negotiating power with airports and manufacturers to actually pull off a transformation. EasyJet has incredibly strong brand recognition in the UK and enough loyal customers to support a premium shift. But the dozens of smaller budget carriers scattered across Europe? They don't have those advantages. They're finished. The industry will almost certainly consolidate down to maybe 2 or 3 major low-cost carriers in Europe, plus the traditional airlines picking up the pieces. Everyone else gets acquired for pennies or liquidated completely. We've already watched this exact pattern play out in the United States. Low-cost carriers like Spirit and Frontier struggled so badly that Spirit filed for bankruptcy protection in 2024. The market just can't support that many budget airlines anymore. For regular travelers, the future looks significantly more expensive and way less convenient. Those spontaneous weekend trips to European cities for under £100 return. They're rapidly becoming fond memories that you'll tell people about in 10 years. Budget airlines will technically still exist, but they'll be budget in name only. You'll be looking at higher base fares with slightly fewer frills than traditional carriers, not the revolutionary cheap travel that defined the 2000s and 2010s. The smart money says we're entering a post-budget airline era. Flying will become more expensive, less frequent, and more considered. It'll be treated as something special again rather than something you do on a whim. The generation that grew up taking cheap flights everywhere, grabbing a 25-pound return to Amsterdam for a weekend or flying to Barcelona more often than taking the train to Manchester, will tell their kids about the golden age of European aviation. That brief window when you genuinely could fly to Prague for less than a tank of petrol. It's kind of sad to see an entire industry model dying in real time. Budget airlines genuinely democratized travel and fundamentally changed European culture. They made studying abroad accessible, turned weekend city breaks into a normal thing, and connected the continent in ways that didn't exist before. But they built their entire business on circumstances that simply don't exist anymore. Cheap fuel, available aircraft, exploitable labor, and regulatory tolerance. Every single one of those foundational pillars has completely crumbled. Whether budget airlines collapse entirely or transform into something unrecognizable, the cheap flight era is definitely ending. Book those bargain fares while you still can, because they're absolutely not coming back. Thank you for watching. If you've found this eye-opening, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you've noticed these changes when booking flights lately. I'll see you next time.